consequences. Now I am going to show Rakshita few examples of advantages of using the pawn majority on time. So let's bring the first position on the board. White has king h1, pawns h2, g3, f3, e4, b2, a3, queen f2, knight e2, bishop c1, bishop c2, rook e1, rook d1. Black has king g8, pawns h5, g7, f7, a6, b5, c5, queen c7, rook c8, d8, bishop b7, bishop e5, knight f6. So this is one from my game which I played in 2008, and that's the year when I stopped playing professional chess. And we have queenside majority for black. It's coming from a Semislav opening. And black has queenside majority, but white has central majority. Usually the central majority is more useful to have in the middle game, and queenside majority is more effective in endgame. Okay, but in this case there is a small problem for white, which is the king h1, bishop b7. Okay, because of this diagonal and the king being present in that diagonal, he is not able to mobilize his pawn majority. He is not able to play moves like f4, e5, which he would love to play otherwise. So probably the bishop belongs to g2 here, not c2. Okay, so how should black play here?
c4, b4 and a5.
So c4, b4 and a5, these three moves are interesting. Fine. So when you were looking at the board, I was observing what you were doing. Your face like turned towards the king side, and then you are looking like probably for some sacrifice, knight e4, knight g4, something like this. Were you also considering those options?
Yeah, but I don't think it's working.
You don't think they are working. But one suggestion for you is, when you are thinking, try not to move the head to the direction where you are thinking. It kind of gives a clue to your opponent. Our move should come as a surprise to him wherever possible. But if your intention is to scare him away, then it makes sense to look at the king side. So just to, if that is the point, but otherwise try to not move the head around too much when you are analyzing the position, and just to look at the position with your eyes. Okay, and your opponent should not be able to guess where you are focusing. Okay, and in that case, the move which you are about to play can come as a surprise for him. That will give you some psychological advantage. Fine. So I was also considering, should I play h4 or g5 or knight g4, knight e4, all these type of moves, but quickly came to the conclusion they are not working. So I said, okay, if I cannot do anything on the king side, let me try to do something somewhere else. So I have a choice, like you said, all the three pawn moves on the queen side are possible. I chose to play a5. So the point of a5 is, now I can play b4, and if he takes a b4, I can take a b4. So this pawn on c5 and b4, they will keep the knights e2 restricted, and I will have the option to play c4. Okay, so he took rook d8, and rook d1. So this is one thing I have noticed with many players. What they usually do whenever they feel they are in danger, they quickly start exchanging pieces. They think like exchanging pieces will somehow reduce the risk. But it is true, if opponent is attacking you and you are exchanging pieces, that will reduce the power of the attack. But if there are other advantages, then exchanging pieces would not help all the time. So I took rook d1, bishop d1, b4. Now I did not even think much about this move, but yesterday when I was checking this game with the computer, as usual, it just depressed me because I missed knight e4. Okay, the computer always comes up with the best moves all the time, and as I mentioned, this was one of my last tournaments as a player, so I was not really like trying to play the best moves. I was just having fun playing the moves that came naturally to me. So, but now in hindsight, it looks like so obvious that I missed this move. The point is, after knight e4, f e4, bishop e4, king g1, I saw till here I could not find a good follow-up. I rejected it and played b4. When I have a simple plan, why unnecessarily complicate things? But after knight e4, fe4, bishop e4, king g1, can you find the move for black?
Queen d6.
Very good, queen d6. So I don't remember, maybe I did not see queen d6, or either I saw underestimated, I don't know what was the point. Okay, queen d6 now. And if I move the bishop away, let's say bishop, where can I move? That's the problem.
Bishop a4.
No, the pawn is still on b5. In the game I played b4, but instead of b4 we are considering queen d6. Bishop is under attack. Now I don't have squares for the bishop. Okay, if I play bishop b3, c4, bishop a2, the bishop is effectively dead. And then I can come
Queen
queen
d1.
d. Yeah, so he cannot move the bishop. So he has to protect the bishop, and he cannot do it with knight c3. So he has to do it with queen e1. Okay, and then you come queen d3. Idea is queen f3. Okay, to stop queen f3, if you move the knight, I will get bd4. Okay, so the position is completely lost after queen d6. Okay, I did not even consider this seriously. I played b4, bishop c2. So now he has prevented the sack, c4. But I am still much better. My pawns are rolling forward, my pieces are active, his king is weak. So I have all the trumps, ab4, queen e3, b3. So you can see from this example that black got an advantage because he effectively used the pawn majority. And how do we make use of the pawn majority? By start rolling them. But again, it does not mean that whenever you have a pawn majority, you should immediately roll it. The timing is important, of course. Let's bring the next position on the board. White has king g1, pawns h2, g3, f2, e3, a2, b2, rooks a1, e1, queen e2, knight c3, bishop c1, bishop g2. Black has king g8, pawns h7, g6, f7, a5, b7, c7, rooks a8, e8, queen d8, knight b6, bishop e5 and bishop c8. So in this position, if you see, again white has central pawn majority. He has an extra pawn in the center, the e pawn. Black has queen side pawn majority. He has the c pawn extra on the queen side. So which is more important? Okay. And currently, if you look at the position, let's say if black manages to play something like c6 to reduce the pressure of bishop g2 on b7, and then let's say bishop e6, which is a natural square, and maybe pull back the bishop to g7, so it's not left hanging in the middle, and then let's say queen e7, rook a d8, something like that, his position is completely fine. Okay, we can also add moves a4 to get control over the c4 square. Okay, and then black will be perfectly fine. His pieces are more free. We also have the problem rook e8, queen e2. Okay, queen and the rook in the same file, and the bishop c1, rook a1 not developed. So if we look at the position at the outset, it looks like black is doing very well. So how would you play for white here?
f4 and rook d1.
f4 and rook d1. Okay, if you want to play rook d1, you should want to play the rook a1 to d1. Okay, and if you play rook e1 to d1, you will be losing time. You will just help him play queen e7, which I want to do anyway. Okay, I want to play queen e7, c6, bishop e6, something like this. So you'll just be forcing me to do what anyway I wanted to do, and you will be losing time in the process. Okay, so f4 is fine, and if I go back, let's say bishop g7, you can push e4. Okay, and then try to play e5, knight e4, something like that. So that is an option. In the game he played e4, but basically what white is doing, he is trying to use his pawn majority. So when you have a pawn majority, I am not saying you must always use it. Okay, sometimes you can play on the other side as well. You can do on the side where you have less pawns, like for example in minority attack. So you just play b4, b5, you have less pawns and you still make use of them. So I am not saying when you have a pawn majority you must always push the pawns where you have an extra pawn, but you must seriously consider that. Okay, so here he is trying to make use of the pawn majority. More importantly, he wants the bishop to come out. Okay, we played bishop e6, f4. So I am not going to check the moves with the engine. Now there are two ways to see chess, and I think both are very important. Now with the current generation, one complaint I have is they are seeing every game with engine analysis. Even when they want to learn about exploiting square weakness, or when they want to learn about prophylaxis, or when they want to know how to put the pieces in the best square, they are checking the moves veracity with the help of engines. They are going to see, like, is this the best move or there are some other better moves available. For example, in this example we are seeing white could have played bishop e3 and then played f4, or he can play f4 and then bishop e3, or he could have started with f4 and then played e4. All these are all important decisions, okay, but I am simply skipping those questions, because sometimes we have to see chess to just understand what a strong player is doing, how his mind works, just observe without judging. Okay, and when we simply see a good mind working, and we can learn a lot. Okay, and they might have made mistakes. Okay, some of the moves may be e4 or maybe f4 may not be the best possible move, but still we are seeing how a good mind is working, and we can learn a lot of important lessons. Okay, even if the moves are not perfect, it is perfectly fine for me. Okay, so sometimes you have to see chess just to observe how a strong mind works and draw some right lessons for ourselves. And whenever, sometimes you have to see brutally from the viewpoint of the truth. Okay, is this the best move in the position or not? Okay, and especially when you are doing calculation training, or when you are trying to find some difficult move where you really want to find the best move. Okay, so at such situations you have to go to the bottom of the position and find the truth. Okay, but not always. Sometimes we should be ready to compromise, appreciating the beauty of the second or third best move in the position. It doesn't have to, we don't have to always play the first best move in every position, because we are humans. No one is going to be able to do that, and there's no need as well. If they play a second best move or third best move suggested by the engine, that should not take away the beauty or the learning from the example. He played bishop d4 check, bishop e3. Now he played knight c4, bishop f2, because if bishop d4, queen d4, he will just become very active. Bishop c3, pawn into c3. So the only point I am trying to make from this example is there was pawn majority in the beginning of the position, and white is trying to make use of that pawn majority. Okay, queen d2. So he wants to go to an endgame, and with queen inside pawn majority, it makes sense to go to an endgame. And white has central majority, and he has some attacking possibilities, because the dark square bishop is missing. Like once you get moves like bishop d4, and if you can get f5, and queen f4, queen h6, something like that, if you can get the queen to join the bishop on the dark squares, it will be bad news for black. So he doesn't want to exchange the queens. He played queen f3, also defending the c pawn. Rook e d8, now f5. Rook d3. Now here some calculation is possible, but let's not go into that. So those who are interested, you can pause the video and calculate at this point. Queen g4, bishop d7. Okay, Rakshita, what would you do here for white?
Bishop d4.
Bishop d4. Okay, bishop d4 is possible, but at such situations you should immediately consider rook d4 as well. That's the first move that comes to my mind, because after rook d4, cd4, queen d4, at the worst case I can have knight e5 blockade, and then if I can roll my pawns c5, b5, c4, b4, okay, with the knight e5 support, and your rooks will not have open files, my pawns can be dangerous. Okay, so you'll have a complete blockade on the black squares, your bishop g2 will be passive. So I don't think that is the correct direction. So what other move that comes to your mind?
Rook a d1.
Okay, rook a d1. But rook a d1, the point is you are not playing where you are strong. Okay, you are strong, one on the king side and two in the center. Okay, so your pawn majority is in the center. So you should, the first thing that should be trying to achieve here is e5, e6. Okay, if you can get e5, e6, then his king side will collapse because you are using, making use of your central pawns. And e5, he cannot take bishop f5 because queen c4. So did you miss that point that queen knight c4 is hanging? So you thought e5 means you will lose the f5 pawn. So you see, you are very good in calculation, you are a very strong player, but we still make mistakes, and which is perfectly normal in my opinion. Okay, so let's calculate now. e5, what would he play? So when you play knight e5, if you place a move like b5, it's too slow. Okay, first of all the knight is hanging, but even hypothetically the knight is not hanging, it's just too slow. Okay, so you simply reject those kind of moves. So for he should know that you are threatening to play e6. So he cannot see quiet moves. So what he should see for black? Don't try to analyze variations now. Which is the move you should consider for black? Knight is attacked. He can defend the knight, he can sacrifice the knight, or he can move the knight. If he has to move the knight, where would he move? He cannot play knight e5, cannot play knight d6, knight a3, knight b2, knight b6 don't make sense. Simply eliminate. I am using scanning technique. So what else is remaining? Knight e3. And I cannot play e6 because the queen is under attack. So knight e3 is a forcing move. Okay, I am also threatening knight into g2 and then bishop c6, thing like this. Okay, so after e5, the move you should be considering seriously for black is knight e3. And if you have a good reply for knight e3, then you should go for e5. Okay, so the good reply is rook e3. Okay, you keep the king safe because if bishop e3, rook e3, rook e1 will be under attack. So basically what is happening after bishop e3 is, it is black who is giving threats and we are defending against these threats. Okay, so knight e3, you have to play rook e3. That's what happened in the game. Make the moves. So here you just have to calculate a small variation and everything works. Rook e3, the drawback of rook e3, rook d1. And then he won the game because he will play rook d7 on the next move. And he won the game. So he took queen c3, rook d7. Okay, so it's two pieces for rook, and the white king is reasonably safe. Okay, not enough pieces to attack, and white won the game. So here you see the pawns e5, f5. They were on f2 and e3 few moves back. So he effectively used the pawn majority, and then that's why he won the game. Okay, so in the previous episode, we saw the game Botvinnik versus Tal, where Tal hesitated for one move and he could never get the c4 pawn rolling, c5 pawn rolling to c4. In this example, we saw two games where in one game black used the queen side pawn majority by rolling out the pawns a5, b4, c4, and he got the advantage. And in this case, white rolled the e and f pawns forward and got the advantage. So the lesson to be learnt is, when you have pawn majority on one flank, first you must be aware that I have a pawn majority here and my opponent has pawn majority somewhere else. Okay, so first you need to be aware of the pawn majority, and then two, I mentioned pawn majority. Central pawn majority is good to have in middle game, flank majority is good to have in end game. But again, this is not in every case, but in most cases. There will of course be exceptions. And three, when you have pawn majority, try to, one of the plans, one of the main considerations for you should be how I can make use of this pawn majority, usually by advancing them.